I'll preface this right away by saying that Assassin's Creed Unity is a hard game to love. This isn't going to be one of those videos that tries to sell Unity as some misunderstood masterpiece. There are serious flaws with this game that extend far beyond the bugs, which explains why it was received so poorly at launch. So much of this game is needlessly finicky. Its combat can be flashy, but also incredibly clunky. Its parkour seems to throw you in the wrong direction as much as it does the right one, and its stealth detection system, it just doesn't work. And yet, I do love Unity. I love it because if you can get past its flaws, it presents the player with a fantasy that no other game in this industry even tries to capture. Spend enough time with the mechanics, and you can begin to work around the game's finickiness. You can learn to time your parries and attacks in a way that overrides the combat's clunkiness. You can start predicting the predictions that the snap targeting system will make, and, mostly, go where you intend to go in free running. You can get used to the largely nonsensical vision the AI has, and actually enjoy stealth. With enough of an investment, Unity does become playable, albeit never perfect. Now, it is a serious fault of the game that you have to hurdle over so many unnecessary obstacles to enjoy it. But you know what? It does become really fun. And when you get a handle on the game's systems, you begin to appreciate the unparalleled beauty of Paris, the ridiculous smoothness of Arno's animation set, and the ways in which the game does capture the assassin's fantasy to a degree that no other game has even tried. Look, I wish as much as anyone that Unity was better, but what we have here is still something I'm able to love. My general thoughts of Unity out of the way, I want to address one of its less debated elements, its narrative. There is a stronger consensus with Unity's story than perhaps any other element of this game. Unfortunately, though, that consensus isn't positive. The game's detractors typically don't like it, but even the fiercest defenders of Unity don't seem to like to talk about its story too much. It's the one part of the game they're typically willing to concede as boring and unoriginal. I don't share that view, however. I actually think Unity's story is one of its most complete elements, the part that sticks its landing the best. That doesn't mean it's perfect by any means, but it at least comes off as intentional. And I do largely really like what Unity's story is intending to be, flaws and all. And I'd count it as an absolute win if I could convince more people to appreciate what we have with Arno's story, which is exactly what this video aims to do. The best place to start with this story is with its central character, Arno Victor Dorian. When people think back to Arno's character, the aspect they probably remember best, to his discredit, is his sarcasm. Now, this is understandable. His sarcastic quips are overplayed and, crucially, aren't even all that funny a lot of the time. But there is a lot more to Arno than just his wit. Arno's character is defined, in my estimate, by his obsession with the past. His entire reason for joining the Brotherhood has to do with his desire to right the wrongs he committed in being too immature to prevent De La Serre's death. People often compare Unity's story to AC2's revenge story, but I think it's much more comparable to Black Flag's redemption story. Arno himself is adamant that he's not seeking revenge, but redemption. And the atmosphere of the story backs this up. Nowhere does Arno show the fierce passion Ezio showed to avenge his family. The story feels much more sentimental than zealous.
I can't bear the fact that my carelessness got your father killed. Everything I've done since then has been to fix that mistake.
But Arno isn't just haunted by his past, he's also enchanted by it. Even as he seeks redemption, he's also clearly nostalgic for his carefree past, constantly reminiscing about it with Elise.
Can things ever go back to the way they were before, do you think?
Do you? After everything that's happened? Everything we've lost?
This is one of the least talked about scenes in the entire series, but it's deserving of being held in much higher esteem. Seeing a character look out at one of the most important events in world history, only to selfishly wish he could go back to a time when all of it seemed trivial in the face of youthful passion. How can you not find this entertaining? Another scene which captures this well is the one following the storming of the Bastille. Arno looks down at his broken watch, static in time, but the bells of Notre Dame toll all the same. France is moving forward in history, whether or not Arno wants it to. But it's what France is moving towards, along with the Assassins and Templars vying for its future, which is really at the core of Unity's story. Unity's story is often criticized for being formulaic, and there is some truth to that critique. Making Arno suffer not just one, but two father figure deaths within the story's opening hour was effective at making us care for his story, but not effective at making him stand out in the series. Still, there are a lot of ways in which Unity tells the most innovative story in the series, particularly with how it frames the Assassin-Templar conflict. Unlike pretty much every other game in the series, the Assassins aren't lovable underdogs seeking to topple a regime completely entrenched with Templars. They actually find themselves entrenched with power in the new revolutionary government. And unlike every other game in the series, their central strategy, at least at the start, isn't to kill every Templar they can get their hands on. The game opens with an uneasy, but genuine truce existing between the Templars and Assassins, with both groups working together to steer the revolution towards a just end. I get why some people didn't like this setup, but I think it's a fascinating way to approach this series' central conflict. Look, I was more than happy to kill Templars by the truckload in the Ezio games, because in those games, they're essentially the Galactic Empire with Italian accents. But by this point in the series, we've been shown reasonable Templars in AC3 and Rogue. Now, I don't think those Templars were written particularly well, because those games basically just reversed the dichotomy by making assassins look like insane anarchists. Unity, to its great credit, actually presents both sides of the truce as being reasonable. The player is predisposed to side with the assassins, but the Templar Grand Master, Francois de la Serre, is shown to be, on the one hand, a morally decent human being, and on the other, a voice who sincerely wants the best for France's people. And I'm ready to buy that. If Rogue can ask the player to genuinely side with the Templars, Unity can at least ask the player to respect them. Some of them, at least. The truce can't last forever, because this is still a game about assassinating Templars. Insurgent Templars, to be specific. Francois de la Serre is killed by radicals in his own group. This allows Arno's mission to avenge de la Serre to collide with the Assassin's newfound mission to defeat the radicals who broke their truce. His joining the Brotherhood is as much about honoring his late assassin father as it is about avenging his late Templar father figure. For a game exploring the potential possibilities for unity between these orders, Arno is a great character to center things on. And yet, it's that fondness he dares to feel for a Templar which immediately puts him at odds with the Brotherhood he joins. So says Jay, a YouTuber I really respect but disagree with in regards to Unity, critiqued this aspect of the story by asking why Arno is allowed to use the Brotherhood's training and resources to pursue his own personal vendetta. Why can he use the Brotherhood's creed to avenge a Templar? Now, the problem with this critique isn't that there's no tension between Arno's aim and the Brotherhood's, it's just that Unity is intently aware of this tension and addresses it repeatedly. Arno is constantly being reprimanded by the Council for being too invested in his redemption mission. The reason he's, at least early on, ultimately still allowed to pursue it is explicit.
If he wants to kill Templars, let him kill Templars.
His mission puts his blade in front of targets the Brotherhood is happy to see dead. Targets that seek to undermine France and the Brotherhood. Them sanctioning his investigation is perfectly believable. Conflict is still omnipresent within the Brotherhood, though. Earlier games always portrayed the Brotherhood as a unified force, always agreeing in method and in ideals. Now that is well and good for those games, but I do like Unity maturing things slightly by showing the myriad ways in which a creed as general as spreading freedom would produce arguments. The bulk of the conflict has to do with Belek. He wasn't happy with the truth and its architect, Mirabeau. He thinks the Brotherhood has become too mired in politics and hadn't seized at their chance to completely wipe out the Templars when they could have. The breaking point for him is when Mirabeau agrees to form a partnership with Arno's love interest / Templar / daughter of Francois de la Serre / adoptive sister of Arno. Look, it's kinda gross, but they have good chemistry. Anyway, the first act ends as it began. An insurgent radical in an order killing his supposedly wayward leader. Now Arno confronts Belek and stops him from further purging the Brotherhood, but a lot of damage is still done. Mirabeau is an interesting case study for the themes of radicalism and unity that the game has been prodding at so far. The story doesn't deify him by any means. We do see instances in which he does appear as politically conniving as Belek accuses him of being. But he is also the only assassin who shows any sympathy to Arno's cause. He's the only assassin who appears invested in the French Revolution. He's the only assassin who even talks about the well-being of the French people.
Forget me, Arno. Weep for France.
It's also helpful to note, on a meta level, that the historical Mirabeau was one of the most reasonable voices throughout the Revolution. His historical death is credited by many to be a turning point towards the Reign of Terror. So it's fitting that his death in Unity marks a turning point for the Parisian Brotherhood's fall. One of the most common errors I see people make when discussing Unity's story is in assuming that the Parisian assassins are the good guys throughout the narrative. No, this is not the Italian or Caribbean Brotherhood. This is an order entrenched with power that it doesn't even know what to do with. We see flashes of all this before Mirabeau's death, but the Brotherhood's faults shine much brighter after Balek's failed coup. People criticize Unity for focusing too much on the Assassin-Templar conflict and ignoring the French Revolution. And I would push back on that. We get to experience the storming of the Bastille, we see the build-up to and culmination of the conspiracy to kill King Louis XVI, and while this section is admittedly rushed, we do get to see dramatic parts of the Reign of Terror. What is inarguable, however, is that the Brotherhood ignores the French Revolution. The one mission they assign Arno after Mirabeau's death is to just steal some documents to protect their sphere of influence. Arno now has to pursue his own personal mission away from the Brotherhood's sanction. To get back to Jay's critique of the story, the question isn't why the Brotherhood ever allowed Arno to pursue his mission for redemption. The question is why they never encouraged him to pursue it full throttle. Arno is a one-man army against the Templars in this game. And he's not just killing the people who murdered his father figure. He's killing the people that are starving the masses, killing thousands in the Reign of Terror, sowing chaos and death everywhere they go. Critics of Unity's story accuse Arno's mission of being selfish, but there is no reason to come to that conclusion. Arno consistently chooses targets with a mind towards the active havoc they are causing France. His passion for stopping them grows whenever he sees them terrorizing people. His motivation for killing Latouche has nothing to do with avenging de la Serre, and everything to do with the role he is playing in the Reign of Terror. Arno does have a personal stake in this mission, but he's not a fanatic. His personal mission for redemption is making France a better place. The Brotherhood, meanwhile, sits twiddling their thumbs, arguing day and night about their political power. Whatever truth there was to Balek's claim that Mirabeau was too concerned with politics, it applies 1,000 times more to the council after Mirabeau dies. When they eventually expel Arno for trying to stop the Grand Master of the Templar Order, who at this point has steered France towards the Reign of Terror, they can only insist on his supposed personal vendetta. But you know who else had a personal vendetta? Ezio, Connor, and Edward. Whereas these characters found brotherhoods who were willing to slowly shape their grief and shame into ideals and principles, the Parisian Brotherhood can't tolerate Arno wiping out the entire Templar Order if he doesn't do it for the right enough reasons. Arno is the only true assassin in this game. Ezio's family is always lingering somewhere in the soundtrack throughout his assassination missions, but it never enters the Brotherhood's hideout. These aren't assassins. They may not break the creed, but they don't live up to it at all. They loom over Arno during his expulsion scene like tyrants, dismissing his pleas for help with Germain with callous disregard.
Yes, but listen!
Yes, but listen! Is that the regard in which you hold the Brotherhood?
So, just for review, one ancient order in this game is so decadent and power-hungry that they neglect to care for the people they've sworn to protect. And the other ancient order becomes so radicalized in their discontent as to eventually sow chaos all across France. And people say this game isn't thematically connected with the French Revolution. It's not just the Brotherhood that abandons Arno, though. It's also Elise. Briefly, at least. All because he chose protecting her instead of going after the man who killed her father. People get annoyed at this scene because they think the game is siding with Elise. But she says,
I'm willing to risk everything to put Jamin down. If you don't have the stomach for revenge, then I don't need your help.
Ask yourself, Is there a single character in this entire game who is depicted well for being willing to do anything for the sake of their goals, for believing that the ends always justify the means? Elise isn't portrayed at all as negatively as Balek or Germain, but her father's death clearly weighs on her in a more impassioned way than it does for Arno. We then get a scene showing Arno's descent into drunkenness, which, yes, does tread some tropey grounds, before Elise returns and appeals for him to help her one last time. Arno is unapologetic about what he did. He makes it clear that he won't say sorry for preferring her over revenge. Elise looks at him as he says this with an odd mix of sadness and confusion. She loves Arno, but she can't understand him. To the writer's credit, they didn't write a hasty reconciliation scene here. People sometimes peg Elise as manipulating Arno, which Arno himself accuses her of doing, but if she was consciously trying to do that, she would have Fox apologized to him. She doesn't soothe Arno with lies here. She doesn't hide the fact that she's at an impasse with him. But she can still call up Arno's nobler nature. So, the pair do return to Paris together, just on colder grounds. From here on out, the two of them will work together to stop the Reign of Terror, which, surprise surprise, is actually the architect of the Templars, particularly their new Grand Master Germain, who was also behind Francois de Lesserre's murder. It is disappointing that the Reign of Terror is described in this game more than it is depicted, but that doesn't mean it still isn't very important in Unity's story. It's the main thing Germain is building to throughout the entire game, and we get extensive dialogue detailing exactly how he intends to use it to usher in a new age of Templar control. I've heard Unity receive criticism for people for not dealing with AC's central themes of liberty and order. There's truth to that to the extent that we don't really hear any assassins espouse the Brotherhood's philosophy in the same way Ezio or Edward did. That's because, as previously noted, there really aren't many true assassins in this game. But Germain using the anarchy of the Reign of Terror as a way to goad people into preferring tyranny is about as close to the themes of Assassin's Creed as it is possible to get. It's also exactly what happened historically. The battle over the Sword of Eden does make for a kind of odd ending conflict for the game. You can say it serves as a MacGuffin, but it mercifully isn't present for the entire game up until its final mission. I much prefer the conflict centering on Germain's influence on the French Revolution than it centering on chasing a magical sword all around Paris. Germain himself is adamant that the fight over the sword doesn't really matter. He's already won. However many Templars Arno kills, he's prepped France for tyranny. Really, the sword just exists as an excuse for one final confrontation between Arno and Elise and Germain.
We should split up.
I'm not sure that's...
Less chance we both get caught that way.
I suppose that's true.
I love this exchange. Something like it was needed to explain why the player goes into the temple alone, but it does so much more than just contextualizing gameplay. Everything is said with the acting and mocap. Their odds of killing Germain do increase by splitting up, but so diminishes the odds that both make it out alive. Elise can stomach that. Arno can't. So when she gets put in the same situation Arno was in, anyone can guess what choice she'll make. She's not Arno. She'll throw herself right into Death's arm for just a fool's chance of getting revenge. The last piece of Arno's nostalgic past dies like the rest have died, with fanaticism. Arno may have redeemed himself, but he doesn't win. I may not agree with a lot of criticisms people have for Unity's story, but I can at least understand most of them. The one I can't, however, has to do with saying that Arno's closing speech is unearned. Arno personally saw 2 ancient orders collapse due to fanaticism and take an entire country down with them. He saw multiple loved ones die due to and by fanaticism. He has every narrative right to decry it. In a franchise full of impassioned speeches, Arno's speech here is one of its most earned. To go back to AC's themes on the tension between liberty and order, while there is plenty that Unity comments on regarding that tension, I would agree that it is not Unity's central theme. The central theme of Unity's story is the context in which dealing with that tension becomes impossible. Unity is a cynical game. It's hard to write a story on the French Revolution that isn't cynical. It's the only game in the series where the bad guys do more or less win in the end. It's still one of my favorite endings in the series, however. The entire story builds to it. It's a tragedy that at once feels entirely preventable given the choices presented to its characters, and completely inevitable given the characters making those choices. It entangles a national crisis side by side with a personal tragedy, and reveals how both are caused by starkly human sins. And this may be my most controversial take in this video, but I think it's the ending that most merited a direct sequel. Arno's character has so much room to develop and grow. We know that he eventually rejoins the Brotherhood and becomes a master assassin. I want to see how that happens. More than Arno, however, this time period demanded a sequel, and I think the writers were pushing for that to happen. Germain himself makes an almost too on-the-nose prophecy about a future tyrant taking hold of France. We know who he's referencing. I lose sleep over an AC game set during the Napoleonic Wars. I know this game isn't happening, but it really should. Look, I know that Unity's story has flaws. I know that its first act has plot holes, and that its second act is too slow, and that its third act is too fast. I know its dialogue can either be overly dramatic or overly sarcastic, and so much of Arno's character is wasted on quips. I wish as much as anyone that this story was better, but what we have here is still something I'm able to love.